Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst was a sweet little girl from Germany who was sold to an uneducated and barbaric Russian king to be his bride. And when she married the king, she promised herself that she would never let this be the fate of another young girl. The sweet young girl turned into Catherine, the great Empress of Russia. Under her rule, Russia became the strongest empire in the world. She ruled it with iron strength. She commanded armies, and Russian enemies were terrified of her name. And she died while she was making love to a horse. Wait, what? Why would such a strong woman decide to do that with a horse? This doesn't make any sense, or does it? Let's look at the life and ruling years of Catherine the Great and what led her to the events that followed. In 1745, Russia was ruled by Peter III, and he was a stupid king who did not understand politics or ruling policies. He was a fool, and everyone knew it. Russia was in a dark age while he was the king, the Tsar. And although he was a complete fool, he was clever enough to not marry a Russian lady. Because if he did, the generals would overthrow him. So he married Catherine, who had German blood in her. Peter III knew Russians would never tolerate a ruler with foreign blood. And he won this bet because Russian generals never accepted Catherine as their queen. Even the nobles of Russia kept their distance from her, and it suited her just fine, because Catherine had no time to gossip with nobles or debate with generals. She had a kingdom to steal and a world to change, one step at a time. You should know that before Catherine became the queen, there were no written laws in Russia. People had no regard for education, especially women education, and arts and crafts were considered witchcraft and magic. There were no poets or novelists coming forth. People did not even know what a pencil was, even if you hit them with it on the face. They were barbaric and proud of it. In fact, they did not even bury their dead. Even the royal palace had skeletons and corpses of former kings and queens hanging around in some rooms. The economy was bad, Russia was isolated from the rest of Europe, there were no reforms, and the military was struggling to defend its own small territory. The Russia of back in the day was very small. And Catherine the Great changed all of this to make Russia the strongest empire in the history of the world. But if Russians hated her for being a German, how did she do it? How did she become the queen? Well, Catherine was intelligent. Instead of wasting her time on nobles and generals, she befriended the Russian youth. She spent her days with youngsters, winning their hearts. Her plan to power was long-term, and she knew that her greatest ally was the next generation of Russia. So, while she was assaulted at night by Peter III, she spent her daytime educating girls and boys. She befriended the oppressed and cleverly directed her husband Peter III towards recreating policies that were beneficial to slaves and minorities as well. Over time, people grew to love her, and her husband could see it as well. So, he tried to set her up in a scandal. He forced her to take up a lover and tainted her purity by showing her as a cheat to his nobles and generals. Still, Catherine was 2 steps ahead of him at every move. She tricked him back by saying that if he were a man enough, she would have no need for a lover. It humiliated Peter III in front of all his generals and won Catherine favors from the people who disliked her. Soon enough, the next generation came into power, and Catherine was ready to be the queen. She challenged her husband for the Russian throne. Peter III went to war against Catherine and lost terribly. He had no brain for strategy, and the support and resources dried away. After losing the throne to Catherine, Peter III was murdered by his own generals, though they claimed that Catherine ordered them. Once in power, Catherine did her best to change the fate of Russia. Under her rule, Russia expanded. She won lands and territories through wars and diplomacy. She even allied with neighboring countries who had isolated Russia before. She waged successful wars against the Ottoman Empire, Poland, and Sweden, significantly increasing Russia's size and influence in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus region. Russia's first ever state-funded school for girls was built under her rule. Catherine also introduced the significance of art and culture in Russia. She amassed an extensive art collection, including works by European masters, and founded the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg to showcase her collection. She improved the architectural and cultural richness of Russia by supporting the construction of numerous palaces, churches, and public buildings. Even the Russian Academy of Arts and Sciences was established by her. But the best thing that she did was firing all the old policy and lawmakers. When they complained, her response was, "You write on an unfeeling paper, while I write on human skin." The new laws that she made were moderate and progressive. Under her rule, no one was oppressed. In fact, she even gave minorities the freedom to practice their religions and be part of the Russian politics and army. Muslims were free to build mosques, Hindus free to build temples, and Christians, of course, free to build churches. And she handled the law reforms so well that there were no disputes among common people and nobles. During her reign, she corresponded with leading philosophers and thinkers of her time such as Voltaire and Diderot and embraced their ideas of reason, liberty, and progress. She made sure that her people, the Russians, had equal rights, property protection, and legal reforms that even treated criminals in a human way. Her war strategies were sharp and crisp. It was her generals who gave her the title the Great. Through strategic alliances and territorial acquisitions, she expanded Russia's borders to the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. Undoubtedly, she is one of history's most formidable female leaders. But where does the horse event fit in all of this? And why does Russia no longer love and respect her? Is it because she died in such a way, or is the secret even more shameful or sinister than this? After stealing the throne from her husband, Catherine never married again. She knew that if she married someone, her enemies could kill her and steal the throne from her. But she had to secure her rule in the Russian territory as well, so Catherine took up lovers. She made love to generals and high-ranking nobles, and when they fell in love with her, she appointed them to different Russian territories because she knew they would never cheat on her. It was strategic planning, and it did bring her her desired results. But it also gets her reputation as a queen with an unhealthy appetite for certain things. The ladies in her court started calling her a vampire who was more on men's lap than on her throne. But did she have any children? Yes, Catherine had suffered many miscarriages when she was married to Peter III. The only child that lived to adulthood is debated to be from her lovers instead of her husband. Her son was named Paul, and he was just as foolish as her husband, Peter III. So to save Russia from another stupid king, Catherine appointed her grandson Alexander as to be the top ruler of Russia after her death. While Paul was raised by royal nannies, Alexander was raised by Catherine herself. She taught him politics, warfare, and everything that makes a great king. He was the spitting image of Catherine as a person, another the great in the making. And because Catherine favored her grandson, her own son Paul hated her. He hated her name and the legacy she had created. But there was nothing he could do about it. Or was there? After Catherine died in her sleep from heart arrest, Paul was the first person to find her, and he did the cheapest thing he could. He brought a horse in the chamber and told everyone that his mother died in an unusual way. Because the rumors of Catherine's appetite of certain things were already gossip in the court, everyone believed it. This man, Paul, destroyed the whole image of Russia and his hatred. People were so ashamed of Catherine that they did not even let Alexander be the next ruler. Instead, they chose Paul as their king. And the first thing that Paul did after becoming the queen was to forbid any and every woman forever ruling Russia again. He changed laws so that no other woman could be the ruler of Russia. There could be queens, but without any power. Paul also brought a backward age in Russia by preventing female education and destroying Russian assets and treasury. And did Russia let all this happen? It did. And did Alexander also let all this happen? He did not, thankfully. Alexander had his father Paul assassinated when he was sleeping. Paul was strangled to death in his sleep, and Alexander became the ruling king of Russia the next morning. Sadly, there was nothing he could do to clear the name of Catherine and her reputation from history. He had to take solace in the fact that Catherine was still remembered as the Great in history, even though his father Paul had attached a sinister and shameful rumor to it. Much of the ruling time of Alexander was spent to undo the damage caused by his father. Catherine had ruled Russia for 3 decades, Paul only for 3 years. It's crazy that Paul destroyed 30 years of progress done by Catherine in just 3 years of his rule. But this is nothing new when it comes to history. Throughout the historical records, men have destroyed the legacies of great female rulers out of bitterness and the hatred. Catherine is not the first queen to be tainted this way, and as long as there is monarchy in this world, she's not going to be the last either. Do you think future generations will ever overlook the rumors attached to Catherine and see her for the great queen empress that she was? Let's hear from you in the comments. Also, don't leave without hitting like and sharing this video with friends and family.